And frankly, the Democrats have to make it clear to the far left that they almost cost him this election.
Joe Biden is now the president-elect, and the conservative crap has already started. I'm going to show you John Kasich on CNN discussing why he thinks Joe Biden won and why certain Democrats lost their race in the House. And then I'll get to AOC completely shutting it down. But I'm also going to go through a lot of data showing you exactly why John Kasich is 100% wrong. But first, here he is yesterday on CNN after Joe Biden was declared president-elect.
Now is the time for Democrats, and I believe Joe Biden will do this, to begin to listen to what the other half of the country has had to say. But we have to listen to what those folks, those Republicans, all across this country has had to say. The best thing that's happened to Joe Biden is the fact that the United States Senate is either going to be Republican or very close, and the far left can push him as hard as they want. And frankly, the Democrats have to make it clear to the far left that they almost cost him this election. And that Congresswoman from Virginia warned the Democrats, you want to talk about defunding the police, you'll have no support. And I think this is an opportunity for Biden to talk about the center right and the center left of this country and what can be achieved. Because we have enormous problems with debt, Social Security, Medicare, health care. Little steps, little steps. One other thing, one Democrat told me at some point, if they'd have been more clear in rejecting the hard left, they would have appealed more to Americans who I believe essentially live in the middle. So I think actually he's in a better position today because being pulled from the left isn't going to work. They will not get those things done.
All right. I'm going to get to the reaction from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in a minute here. But first up, let me debunk all of this crap with some actual data, which of course, John Kasich has none to back up his points. I have the actual data showing you where voters actually stand. So first up, I want to react to his comment about Black Lives Matter or defund the police hurting the Democratic Party. In May and June, when Democratic voter registration had bottomed out due to the pandemic and GOPs were out registering Democrats, it was the George Floyd/Black Lives Matter demonstrations that created a huge Democratic voter registration spike. So those protests helped the Democratic Party. That's what the data shows us. And by the way, I will link to all of this below the video. You can go through all this data yourself, but that's what it shows us. So right there on that point, John Kasich is wrong. Moving on to the idea that most Americans are in the middle. He's right. Most Americans are in the middle, but he thinks the middle is conservative. The middle is not conservative. This is the middle. 69% of Americans want Medicare for all, including 46% of Republicans. You look at any recent poll on Medicare for all, it shows you the exact same result. Most people back Medicare for all. In fact, in exit polling, on election night, this is a Fox News exit poll. It was even on screen. Changing to a government-run healthcare plan. Strongly favor 39%, somewhat favor 33%. That is 72% support for a government-run healthcare plan in a Fox News exit poll. Most Americans are in the middle. Most Americans are progressive. When it comes to the actual policy issues, this is where the American people stand. And it doesn't just apply to healthcare. This Hill-Harris X poll from September 3rd to 4th. Do you support a proposal that would make public colleges, universities, and trade schools free for all and cancel all existing student debt? 58% support. The majority of Americans that are in the middle, moderates, support canceling all student debt and having public colleges, universities, and trade schools free for all. Nearly 2/3 of Americans, this is a Pew Research survey, nearly 2/3 of Americans say new laws would be effective in reducing role of money in politics. The majority of people understand that money corrupts politicians and want new laws to limit the ability for corporations and wealthy individuals to buy elections. This is a moderate policy. All of these policies, Medicare for all, limiting campaign spending, free public college, canceling student debt. These are all moderate positions. They're moderate because the majority of people agree with them. They're not crazy left positions. They are moderate positions. Wealth tax. This from Reuters, January 10th, 2020. Majority of Americans favor wealth tax on very rich. Reuters Ipsos poll. Again, you look at polling when it comes to taxes. You could also look at Gallup. Look at any poll on taxes. The majority of people think that the wealthy and corporations are taxed aren't taxed enough, and that lower income and middle income people are taxed too much. Guess what? The left agrees with you. This is a moderate position because most people agree that the wealthy are not paying enough in taxes. Same with corporations, not paying enough in taxes. This is a moderate position. But John Kasich would think, no, conservative. Moderates they're more conservative. Show me the data. Where's the data? On the actual policy issues, people lean towards these progressive policies. Now, let me get to AOC's reaction and some other points here. So AOC tweets out in response to this hilarious John Kasich clip, saying John Kasich, who did not deliver Ohio to Dems, worth pointing out, John Kasich's Ohio win to Donald Trump, is saying folks like Ilhan Omar, who did deliver Minnesota, are the problem. Please don't take these people seriously and go back to celebrating and building power. Ilhan Omar, where there was, some suspicion that Trump may be competitive in Minnesota. Nope. Biden won Minnesota in big numbers. Meanwhile, John Kasich's Ohio goes for Trump. So, what's the actual strategy here? Again, he doesn't know where the American people actually sit on these issues. Kasich is a former Republican governor of Ohio who campaigned for Biden, endorsing him as a centrist that moderate Republicans could get behind. Such an appeal might have had traction in some places, such as northern Michigan and western Omaha, but Trump beat Biden in Ohio by 8 points and 500,000 votes. Turns out running on a economic empty message doesn't work. Now, Joe Biden had some issues he could have pushed more. He could have discussed more. $15 minimum wage, for example. But he barely touched those issues, focusing more on the hatred of Donald Trump, which is fine. It makes sense to discuss how terrible Donald Trump is, but you should have also been offering people a real economic message. And most of Biden's economic message during the campaign was just platitudes. And he never really got deep into his policy. Policy, which, by the way, of course, did not go far enough. Jordan Ull tweeting out here, saying Kasich led a fracking boom in my state, being Ohio. That poisoned water caused earthquakes, and oil companies took advantage of desperate people to steal their gas for profit. On top of that, he was anti-choice, anti-union, slashed school funding, and opposed marriage equality. He's not an ally. There's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done, or a lot of work that we're going to have to do when it comes to ensuring that these sorts of attacks from people like John Kasich are snuffed out immediately. That we cannot listen. We cannot give space to any of these morons because the people are simply not with them. Democrats will continue to lose elections if they listen to people like John Kasich. Aidan Smith, I'm not going to go through all these names because there is a lot here, as you see, but House Dems who lost re-election in 2020. Donna Shalala, an opponent of Medicare for All and defunding the police. Joe Cunningham, an opponent of Medicare for All and defunding the police. And it goes down. Xochitl Torres-Small, an opponent of Medicare for All and defunding the police. Every single person, every single House Democrat that lost their race against Medicare for All and against defunding the police. So if it was really the fault of the people on the left, of people like AOC or Ilhan Omar, then why did they win their districts in huge numbers? Why was it that the moderates, only moderate Democrats, or in their words, moderate, in reality, conservative, why is it that these conservative corporate Democrats lost their races while you have working class politicians like AOC, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib winning their races in big numbers? And by the way, Katie Porter, in a purple district, Katie Porter flipped a district that was red for its entire existence since the early 80s. Katie Porter flipped that seat, and she's incredibly progressive, backs Medicare for All. She flipped that seat and won her re-election by over 20 points. How can you possibly blame these conservative losses, these conservative Democratic losses, on more progressive working class candidates? The data just isn't there. AOC also tweeting out here saying every single swing seat House Democrat who endorsed Medicare for All won re-election or is on track to win re-election. Every single one. AOC saying here, quote, if I lost my election and I went out and said this is moderates' fault, this is because you didn't let us have a floor vote on Medicare for All, and they opened the hood on my campaign and they found that I only spent $5,000 on TV ads the week before the election, Ocasio-Cortez said, they would laugh. And that's what they look like right now, trying to blame the movement for Black lives for their loss. So this is another issue that AOC has a long thread on. A lot of these losses by these moderate, or stop saying moderate, but by these conservative pro-corporate Democrats, a lot of these losses were campaigns that barely put any money into digital. How in the year 2020 do you barely spend any money on digital campaigning and expect to win? So not only did they not support the right positions, they also didn't know how to actually get their message out there. All of it leading to their losses. AOC tweeting here saying, I saw party consultants take over a congressional swing campaign operation this year and it wasn't good. The blind impulse to blame activists and the left both demoralizes a key constituency and distracts from asking real questions and fixing serious operational issues. Of course. Last tweet here from AOC saying, one thing I'll say for the last 2 years, I and progressive candidates have been unseating powerful Dem incumbents supported by DCCC. Not once has anyone in the party asked me what weaknesses I found in their operation. If they stop blaming progressives, we can help. So AOC pointing out here, she took out Joe Crowley. Jamal Bowman took out Elliot Engel. Cori Bush took out Lacey Clay. You have these progressive working class candidates taking out Democratic leaders in the House, and the DCCC or the Democratic Party not even bothering to ask, how did they do it? What strategy did they use? Like, showing you again how completely incompetent, even apart from policy, just on strategy alone, how completely incompetent the Democratic Party is. One last thing here I want to leave you with. This is fantastic. Breaks it down perfectly. One thing centrist Democrats might consider is that in a lot of places, by the way, I should give proper credit here. I'll do it afterward because I'll have to find the person's name. But they say here, one thing centrist Democrats might consider is that in a lot of places, their brand is absolute garbage, even if their policies are well liked. How else do you explain a 23-point victory for a $15 minimum wage in Florida and a 3.5-point loss for Biden, who supported it? How do you square a 67% defeat of right to work in Missouri in 2018, along with a 6-point loss for Claire McCaskill? What is the lesson from voters casting ballots for recreational weed in Montana and South Dakota and medical weed in Mississippi, despite those states all going for Trump by double digits? It's not the fault of trans people, socialists, or Black Lives Matter. This is not just a policy issue. It is a complete failure in strategy, in thinking that most people lean conservative when they simply do not. Now, the only poll that cable news will ever cite when it comes to these issues is how people self-identify. They'll point to a Gallup poll saying, look, most people self-identify as moderate or conservative, so that must mean they want moderate and conservative policy. Yet, $15 minimum wage, is that moderate or conservative? I mean, I would say it's moderate because it's popular, but in their world, moderate means more conservative, so that wouldn't fit into their definitions. Defeating right to work, or I should say, the power of unions, they would say is far left, but in reality, that is a moderate position that most Democrats should take up, improving labor laws. Or recreational weed, they would say that's far left, but in reality, it's a moderate position because most people support that. Total failure. Total and complete failure. It's great. Donald Trump's out. It's awesome. But this race should not have been close. Joe Biden almost lost. It was way too close. All the Democratic Party had to do was actually embrace some of these policies, was actually fight for something. But they continue to pretend that people lean conservative. Oh yeah, my point about the self-identifying poll. Most people say, they lean moderate or conservative, but they don't know what those labels actually are. This is why you have to look at specific policy polling on specific issues like healthcare, like recreational weed, like wealth tax. You have to look at what the polling actually says on those specific issues, because people may think they're conservative or moderate, but they support Medicare for all. Because people apply different meanings to different labels. Not one person that thinks what, liberal means is not what someone else thinks liberal means. So just recognize, if you ever watch cable news, you ever hear any of these idiots like John Kasich on television, understand they never have any data to back up anything they are saying. And before I forget, because I forgot, Paul Blessed, he's the one that wrote this article from Discourse blog. I will link to this below the video as well. Again, all these links below the video in the description box under sources on YouTube. Check them out and go through all this data yourself.